Okay, Commissioner, you may now begin.
Good morning, all. This is the HOC Development and Finance Committee meeting of January 21. Excuse me. With us this morning are, forgive me, the committee members Rick Nelson and Jeffrey Merkowitz. So the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the Development Finance Committee of November 19. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's moved and seconded. With no questions, would all indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. And now we are going to move. I'm sorry? Excuse me. The next item is an affirmation of a resolution approving Dwight Capital to succeed the lender of love for Paddington Square. And I believe Jennifer and Richard are going to be leading us through this.
Correct. Good morning, commissioners, and Happy New Year. This is Jennifer Arrington, Acting Director of Mortgage Finance. And we have a few items for your consideration regarding the refinancing of Paddington Square Apartments, located in the Rosemary Hills neighborhood in Silver Spring, Maryland, and owned by the Paddington Square Development Corporation, which is wholly owned by the Commission. On April 7th, 2021, the Board of Directors of the corporation approved a resolution that authorized a refinancing plan that included the refinancing of the property's FHA Section 223F senior loan with LOVE funding, and also authorized executing a financing commitment with LOVE funding. While a financing commitment was executed with LOVE funding, it has been acquired by Dwight Capital, LLC, a large commercial real estate finance company established in 2014, an approved FHA MAP lender, and an approved Ginnie Mae issuer. Since new debt cannot be issued under LOVE funding's name at this time, Dwight Capital will succeed LOVE funding and provide the new 223A7 refinancing loan. The corporation will save 85 basis points on the new loan, with closing expected at the end of February. Further, in order to effectuate the transaction, the bylaws of the corporation state that the Board of Directors shall obtain the approval of the Commission not more than 60 days in advance of the issue of any new financial obligations. Therefore, as required by the bylaws, staff recommends that the Development and Finance Committee join its recommendation to the Commission to affirm Resolution 21-001 PS and approve the refinancing plan with the successor lender for the transaction. In addition, in order to close the new loan, FHA requires that the corporation amend the bylaws to include certain FHA provisions that will remain in effect so long as the FHA loan is outstanding. Those recitals or the new article, Article 11, is listed within your packet. Further, to expedite future actions of the corporation, staff recommends removing the 60-day approval period for corporate obligations from the corporation's bylaws and permit the Commission to approve corporate obligations at any time prior to entering into a corporate obligation. The bylaws may be amended subject to the Commission's approval. Therefore, staff recommends that the Development and Finance Committee join its recommendation to the Commission and approve amending the existing bylaws of the corporation to incorporate the required FHA provisions of the new loan and to revise the bylaws to expedite future actions. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Other questions? Rick?
The only question I have is the mechanics of HOC versus the board of the Development Corp, and who does what? Like the bylaw amendments have to be done by them, not by us, right? We're recommending approval of the amendment to the board of the Dev Corp.
Right. Yeah, the Commission must approve the bylaws to be amended so that the corporation can amend them. Is that correct, Asha or Paige?
Yeah, this is Paige. That is correct. So under the corporate bylaws, Commissioner Nelson, it before the corporation can approve an amendment of the bylaws, the corporation has to get the commission's approval first.
And at the
Okay.
commission meeting, there will be a separate development corporation meeting where those actions are taken by the corporation.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was my question. Thank you.
I just have one quick question. I assume this won't have any impact on our ability to resubordinate the HIF loan?
No. All of those approvals have already been received.
Okay. I have no other questions.
Then I guess Chair had to step away, so there being no further discussion, let's take a vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Commissioner Simon? Commissioner Simon, we just took a vote and we have 2 voting in favor of,
Well, thank you.
and are you joining the?
I
Okay,
am.
so it's unanimous.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
you're welcome.
The dog was insisting the door be answered.
Yes, they do that sometimes.
Now, let's turn to the next item.
Marcus Irvin, Director of Real Estate. The next item is going to be regarding Willow Manor properties presented by Catherine Hollister. This will be approval to increase DHCA's share of construction period interim cash flow, a condition for DHCA to close the Willow Manor transaction. Catherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Marcus. Good morning, commissioners. For the record, my name is Catherine Hollister. I'm a senior financial analyst in the real estate division. Staff is requesting the committee to join staff's recommendation to the commission to increase DHCA's share of construction period interim cash flow, a condition for DHCA to close the Willow Manor transaction. On December 17th, 2021, HOC closed on the resyndication of the Willow Manor properties, 3 existing age-restricted LIHTC properties located in Olney, Germantown, and Silver Spring, Maryland. Sources for the transaction include an FHA risk share mortgage, LIHTC equity, county HIF loan, HOC seller note, and HOC equity. Preserving the affordability of the Willow Manor properties has been a priority for HOC and DHCA since 2018. In 2018, DHCA entered into a contract to purchase the properties under the Montgomery County Right of First Refusal Ordinance. DHCA assigned the contract to HOC at closing and provided subordinate financing for the acquisition. The LIHTC resyndication of the properties enabled a permanent financing structure that maximized the amount of proceeds available to renovate the properties and repay a portion of the county's acquisition loan, allowing DHCA to reinvest those funds in other affordable housing endeavors. HOC's initial analysis of the resyndication projected a $10 million repayment of the county's acquisition loan at closing. However, due to a number of factors, HOC's repayment of the county's acquisition loan was reduced to $8.15 million, which was $1.85 million less than originally projected. As a condition to providing additional HIF funds to the transaction, DHCA requested that the HIF loan be amended so that the construction period interim income be distributed 75% to repay the county HIF loan and 25% to repay the seller note. All other subsequent cash flow distributions would be split 50-50. Currently, the HIF loan is structured so that retained cash flow is split 50-50. The retained cash flow amount is projected to be $7.5 million. The increase in DHCA's share of this construction period interim cash flow would result in DHCA receiving approximately $5.625 million of the retained cash flow, an increase of $1.875 million, and HOC receiving $1.875 million of that retained cash flow, which is a decrease of $1.875 million. instead of the 3.75 million each entity would receive if the retained cash flow were distributed 50-50. DHCA's steadfast support and commitment to keep additional funds in the Willow Manor resyndication was critical to the transaction. As such, staff recommends that the commission approve increasing the share of retained cash flow distributed to repay the county HIF loan from 50% to 75%. Should the commission approve staff's recommendation, HOC will need to obtain investor consent to revise the HIF loan documents. The investor has indicated that the proposed change seems reasonable and is reviewing the revision internally. There is no impact to the commission's FY22 operating budget. However, the fiscal impact would be a reduction of 1.875 million in cash flow to HOC if all of the projected retained cash flow were achieved during the construction period. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have any questions.
Jeffrey?
No, I'm okay.
Okay. Would one of you make a motion then?
So moved. I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are unanimous in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to West Side Shady Grove. Who is going to be handling that?
All right, good morning again.
Zachary?
Good morning, commissioners. Marcus Irvin, Director of Real Estate. I'll be presenting this item for
Great.
West Side Shady Grove. Can you hear
Thank
me
you.
okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So staff is here to present this approval to amend the development budget to allocate net financing proceeds from the initial construction closing. Requesting approval to amend the development budget to allocate net financing proceeds generated by the bond issuance in the approximate amount of 2.57 million to be used to repay interest on the interim County Housing Initiative Fund loan, fund to capitalize interest account for payments on the 14.3 million loan from the HPF, which occurred last month, and also set aside the remaining proceeds as a soft cost contingency for the 268 unit mixed income and mixed use West Side Shady Grove development. Recall that back on August 17th, 2021, HOC closed on the issuance of $50 million in limited obligation bonds for the HPF, sold by the commission to PNC Capital Markets and Wells Fargo. Net lendable proceeds was roughly 49.7 million, funded by the HPF, which will incur interest costs at 5% of the loan. And these payments will be made to the county on an annual basis with bond service for a period of 20 years. This, of course, was the first unique collaboration of its kind with the county, and also created this innovative revolving solution source of construction financing for West Side Shady Grove and future projects to come. The goal of the HPF broadly, as mentioned last month, is to produce 2,500 to 3,000 newly constructed units over a 20-year period with the 50 million available. It's anticipated 2 or more development projects can be undertaken at any given time. On average, each transaction will yield about 150 to 180 affordable units and approximately 500 to 600 at the end of the 5 years. And as we know, housing in Montgomery County is in high demand. The HPF, as this innovative financing tool, produces new mixed-in communities, as we see with the development of West Side Shady Grove. So just a month ago, at the December commission meeting, the commission formally approved the acceptance of a loan, the first loan from the HPF, in an amount of 14.3 million. This evidenced by deed of trust and other legal documents. And subsequently, we repaid the 14.3 million short-term HIF loan that was secured at the initial construction closing back in January of 21. Currently, as shown in the pictures, and if you do a drive-by, framing is nearly complete, and we're anticipating lease up to be completed by the end of February 2024, which time we'll convert to the permanent financing and return the 14.3 million HPF for a future project. Highlights of West Side Shady Grove, it's $121 million, 268 unit transit-oriented development. with approximately 30% affordable units, which fits with the HPF's criteria. The savings for this ask resulted in favorable lower interest rates, which allowed us to issue more debt and created a funding surplus of approximately $2.58 million. When we made the presentation for the draw on the HPF, staff had made mention that we would return at a subsequent commission meeting to request allocation of these excess funds, which we're here to present today. So that 2.578 once again would be used to repay the interest on the county HIF loan, closing costs, fund and capitalized interest account, an approximate amount of 1.55 million to account for the payments on the HPF loan. The remaining funds of approximately 564,000 we propose to set aside towards a soft cost contingency to account for any unexpected supply chain issues, inflation, or any subcontractor delays as they are finishing out the units as COVID is still prevalent. So once again, staff is returning per the November 3rd, 2021 approval to formally request this budget amendment to perfect this action. Should these funds not be needed during the construction period, they'd be applied at conversion to reduce the commission's required equity contribution. We have the list here of previous approvals, including the one in November to approve the subordinate loan from the HPF. And that, once again, staff's recommendation request the DNF committee to join staff's recommendation to the commission to approve an amendment to the development budget to allocate excess proceeds from the bond issuance to be used to repay interest on the HIF, fund a capitalized interest account for payments on the HPF, and set aside the remaining funds of approximately 564 for a soft cost contingency. This will increase the closing budget from 119 million .3 to approximately 121.27. If there are any questions, we'll take it at this time.
Questions?
I have no question.
Jeffrey?
No.
Okay, great. Staff, we thank you. It was well done. I'll
Move approval.
thank you.
Second.
Jeffrey, second.
Thank you.
Call for the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Uh,
Wonderful.
One comment I should say to the staff. I do appreciate in this presentation, and it occurs in some, the summary of prior commission actions.
Yes.
As a commissioner, we are not always on top of all the actions that have been taken on each and every one of these transactions, and trying to remember them is sometimes difficult. So it's very useful having a presentation of the specific actions that the commission has taken so that we can refresh our memories and, if necessary, go back and review the files. So I just want to commend and appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I agree. All right. Let's move on. Our next item is the approval of the naming and branding of at the Upton according to the new guidelines.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Christina Otten, Director of Legislative and Public Affairs, and today I am presenting this item. Next slide, please, AJ. So Upton 2 is a 150-unit age-restricted property located in downtown Rockville. The first units having been delivered in late December. A selection of a permanent name is required to support branding and marketing of the property. So in alignment with the guidelines for naming of HOC properties and facilities, which was shared with commissioners in November 2021, staff, with the support of the acting executive director, has developed the recommended permanent name residences at the print shop. And we are requesting that the committee join staff's recommendation of the name to the full commission. Next slide. By way of background, the process was informed by the following guidelines, which may be considered collectively or individually. The recommended name must have a strong positive image and stand the test of time, have appropriate regard for location, geography, or history of the area, commemorate people, places, or events of continued importance to the town, region, or state, and it may recognize outstanding accomplishments by an individual for the good of the community. In this case, staff chose to focus on the local history of Rockville, which honors Principle 2, with an emphasis on the history of Black businesses, and the Rockville economy, which honors Principles both 1 and 4. Next slide, please. Staff used research compiled by the City of Rockville for their African American Heritage Walking Tour, which focuses on the history and contributions of Black individuals and institutions in downtown Rockville. 2 markers along this tour were the focus of the name generation exercise by staff. They were the Hebron House and Print Shop, which is located just 2 blocks from the property, as well as the Lane neighborhood, which you see there runs along East Middle Lane, just due north of the property. Next slide. Upton 2 is surrounded by significant markers of local African American history in Montgomery County. The Lane neighborhood was an area originally settled by freed slaves along what is now East Middle Lane. It was the site of many homes, businesses, and cultural institutions, including the first Clinton AME Zion Church, and it was the home field for Rockville's colored baseball team. By the 1930s, the city began to contemplate revitalization efforts, which were meant to improve the lives of those who were living along the lane and in that downtown Rockville area. But unfortunately, by the 50s, that focus had shifted towards commercial revitalization that eventually resulted in the removal of many of those Black businesses and the cultural institutions from that downtown core. Despite the effects of revitalization, one of the Black businesses that did survive this period was the Hebron House and Print Shop, which was operated by Jesse and Celestine Hebron, just 2 blocks from the current site of Upton 2. The Hebrons moved their print shop and their home to downtown Rockville in 1945 after Mr. Hebron returned from World War II. And the print shop that was owned by them provided services to corporations, individuals, churches, and many other entities throughout Montgomery County and beyond for over 50 years. Next slide, please. And so the recommended name, Residences at the Print Shop, is an acknowledgement of downtown Rockville's Black history and the economic and cultural significance of a community that was overlooked for many decades as a result of revitalization efforts. In alignment with the agency's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, this name recognizes and lifts up that history. And so staff is prepared to create markers and displays both inside the property as well as outside that detail the inspiration for this name and to note the rich African American history that surrounds the property. And so at this time, staff is asking that the Development and Finance Committee join staff's recommendation to the full commission to approve Residences at the Print Shop as the permanent name for Upton 2 and Rockville. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take your questions at this time.
There have been other suggestions since your recommendation went out. What response has the staff had to those recommendations?
So I understand that we have gotten some feedback from commissioners. If folks would like to present what they have, I do understand that there was one request to name the property after the Hebrons themselves. I did want to note that as part of the guidelines, if we are to be naming properties for individuals, it is part of the guidelines that we need to go out and contact either representatives or descendants of those folks that we are going to intend to name a property after. Given the timeline as far as trying to name the property sort of more quickly in short order here, staff chose not to pursue that in order to bring a name more timely. But I can also leave that to Carrie, and I understand that we've had a number of recommendations as well. I know, Commissioner Nelson, there was also a recommendation instead of using the Print Shop to acknowledge the lane, which in fact is directly north of the property. And we are ready and willing to consider that as well, but would appreciate feedback from the other commissioners here on the committee.
That was the direction I was thinking about, like, you know, why not just the residences on the lane? You know, and
I'm with you, Jeffrey. That
Yeah.
was my suggestion the other day, and
Yeah. And I think that's, if I may, I think that's a good name. It's a reasonable alternative. I would just add to Christina's comment on naming it for the persons. I think it's a good suggestion. We are under a significant amount of pressure at the moment by the developer. There is some confusion by us using Upton 2, and it's loosely being used currently because of the first development that they have named the Upton. So they're getting a number of calls for our building at their market rate property, the Upton, and so they're trying to get us to quickly name our property to end that confusion. It's creating some marketing issues for them. And so I'm a little bit concerned that of the time that it would take, and I don't know how long it will take for us to pursue getting the requisite approvals for the use of Hebron in the name. And that said, I think a good alternative is residences on the lane. Has a good ring to it, and I think for marketing purposes, I think it would work.
I would.
Long name, when people are directing Uber or whatever, but I think that it's preferable to the references at residences at the print shop, because people are invariably gonna pick up on the print shop and go driving around thinking they're gonna get to the printer. So I would prefer to do it also as residences on the lane.
I clearly support that, but I would also say that in the materials that we present in the lobby or wherever, we could still go into the kind of description of the print shop and the entire neighborhood that you indicated in this memo, because I think that's very instructive and something that most people are probably unaware of and would be useful to know. But I would therefore put forward the recommendation to the commission that we select the name, the residences on the lane. And the further point, I think, Commissioner Simon, you were referencing this. Number one, on the lane, sort of, it is literally the street abutting the property. So it has some real relationship to the building and makes some sense. And as I think Commissioner Simon indicated, if you had the print shop, people would be expecting to see a print shop in the lobby. And I don't think that's the case. So I would move recommending residences on the lane.
And I'm comfortable with that. My only other idea, and this is just out of curiosity, I'm not suggesting that we have to pursue this, but do we know the name of the baseball team and whether where the field actually was? I was curious, like if we happened to be sitting on top of the field and there was a good name to the baseball team, maybe that would be a fun name for the building.
We did do that research. I don't know the name off the top of my head. One of the things that we did consider, though, was copyright issues. If we would have free permission, especially since obviously we would be referencing that directly. And so we wanted to make sure that we didn't run into any issues related to that, particularly if we were going to be marketing this widely.
Yeah. Well, then for expedience sake, I will second Commissioner Nelson's motion to recommend to the full board the naming for renaming to residences on the lane.
Okay. Great, thank you.
And moved and seconded. And Jeffrey, I welcome your suggestion on photographs, and I think Rick also was relating to maybe even in the lobby, we could have the photographs that you included in the package to relate to the Hebrons and so forth at that location. So that would be great. I'm going to call for the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Rick, did I hear you?
Yes, you heard an aye. I support it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I would say to staff, to avoid any undue pressure of time in future buildings, you might want to consider beginning the process for Shady Grove as we speak, so we don't have to get pressed.
That work is underway, Commissioner.
Good.
You'll be seeing it shortly.
And the same
Thank you
thing, I
so
guess,
much.
on Elizabeth House.
They're all in progress.
All right, great. I know it's a joyful, fun project for the city.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. At this time, we need to vote to close the meeting
Not
and
yet,
move to a,
not yet.
Jackie, I think there's one
I'm
more
sorry?
verbal item.
forgive me, please go ahead. Thank you. We need to take some emergency action yet this morning.
So Zach and Marcus and Paul, I think, are going to be discussing this item.
Yes. So the Metropolitan Apartments was built within an air rights lease with the county, more specifically the parking lot district for Bethesda, and that is because it's partially on top of the parking garage underneath. And then there is also a plaza and green roof in front of Metropolitan Apartments that the apartment complex enjoys. The membrane that is supposed to keep water from the green roof out of the garage has been disintegrating over a period of time since its original construction, and water is actually penetrating into the garage, and in particular the elevators that serve the garage, and obviously that presents a significant problem, both in terms of the the security of the property, but also not having those elevators in service, major accessibility issue. So in order to get an engineer on site as quickly as possible to determine the solution to this problem, and also in preparation for a waterproofing company to restore the seal between the green roof and the parking deck, and as well we'll also have a small bit of civil engineering required for some of the drawings for the permits that will be required to effectuate the solution. We wanted to bring this to the attention of the committee, ultimately with the goal of coming to the commission on the 2nd of February to select SK&A on an emergency basis, given the ongoing threat to property and in particular the constant issues with elevator service. And as part of this, we will also be bringing forward multiple bids from the waterproofing company, and also we will bring bids from the civil engineers that will do the drawing. And so the general idea here is that we will both bid and we will both get the bids for the waterproofing companies, get them on site ASAP for a site visit, and have as much of this information as possible for you on the 2nd. And for whichever information we don't have, we'll obviously return to you with it as soon as we can. But we do know that the first step, unquestionably, is to get the engineer on site to begin to evaluate and design a solution. The goal would be to be permitted by February and to begin work, hopefully by the end of March. So given that this is an emergency issue and a late add to the agenda, I wanted to just first give the overview. And it's probably easier just to open to questions here and start working through any of the concerns you may have.
Are you talking about one contract or two? I'm not sure that I fully understand. Or a contract for design of the solution, a contract for waterproofing, or both? Is it all in one? Is it all in one?
It's going to be both, yeah. So we'll come with both of those items. So SK&A will do the they'll be evaluating and designing the solution. Our purpose in bringing them forward as the firm to use aside from their capability and their availability, is that the commission has already, as part of the planned renovation of the Metropolitan Apartments, the commission has already formally procured for the renovation architect, and SK&A was an identified subcontractor for them as part of the renovation to the apartments. And so they have already been engaged with HOC in terms of evaluating the property, for renovation. And so we view that as the fastest deployment.
But I guess I'm still trying to understand. But there's a separate contract for doing the waterproofing.
Correct.
The wording of this item that we put on here doesn't quite get that across. So I just hope that.
Right. So Commissioner Nelson, we will need to amend the title of this, because I when I sent this up, I thought the engineering firm would design, plan, evaluate the entire and then execute. So that was a misstatement on my part.
Okay.
So we would need two separate things. So we would not look to them to engage, but we would do the work. We would have to bring forth a separate contract. So it will be two things that we'll be asking for your approval for.
Okay.
So just to clarify that.
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
motion on this.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to reiterate what was said in our conversation when I heard about this, that, this does not present an immediate safety issue for the residents. So we're not, it's a structural issue that we need to deal with, but just wanting to make sure that it's, there's no immediate risk to the health or safety of the residents.
That's correct.
We think, however, it's a health and safety risk to the people using the garage because the elevators are out and it blows the accessibility to the elevators in the garage.
It definitely creates an accessibility issue, no question.
Yeah. And therefore a safety issue. So is there a motion? Someone care to make?
I hesitate doing the motion since we don't really have the wording. I think that I would be willing to say that the sense of the committee is that we in fact present to the full commission the procurement to select this evaluation, execution, and the plan and the waterproofing. And I think on the point that Jeffrey made, I'm not even sure it's necessary to describe this as an emergency procurement. It's a procurement, is it not? Or is an emergency necessary to avoid having to go out in a full-scale RFP? Is that the problem?
So that makes it emergency procurement.
Okay.
Yep. But that, but it is defined within our procurement policy. So I think either statement is.
But I think then we ought to ensure that we clarify what the emergency is. And I think the valid concern in terms of the elevator, the electrical system, and the accessibility to individuals in the garage.
Yeah, and there'll be full materials for the commission meeting. So that rather than this verbal introduction. And I also just wanted to say that, you know, staff's been actively working on this. So when this title went out, it was the best info we had at the time, but we've, you know, continued to clarify things over the last, 24 hours or so. So we will make sure that, the accuracy is better when we get to the commission.
So I would support
by consensus here and ask the staff to have a recommendation prepared for the full commission meeting. Agreed?
Great.
All right. At this point, the commission needs to move into a closed session. And so I would ask to adjourn this meeting. If agreed, is there a motion?
I think you have to read a closing statement, don't you?
Yes. And I am going to try and get to that. If you give me a moment. Pursuant to section 3-305B and D of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, I move to adopt the written closing statement dated January 21, 2022, and to adjourn this open meeting to a closed committee meeting to discuss two topics. The first topic is a fee simple acquisition of 3 multifamily properties located in Bethesda. And the second topic is the acquisition of 3 separate multifamily properties located in Bethesda. Both topics must be discussed in closed session for 2 reasons. First, the meeting must be closed to protect the HOC's negotiation power. Second, section 4-335 of the Maryland's Public Information Act prevents disclosure of confidential commercial or financial information obtained from a third party. The meeting must be closed to discuss confidential commercial and financial information provided to HOC from private financial institutions concerning how to finance the acquisition of the properties. The information is customarily and actually treated as confidential by the financial institutions and has been provided to HOC under assurances of privacy. The statutory sections that allow both topics to be held in closed session are section 3-305B3 and section 3-305B13. If any member of the public wishes to object to the closed meeting, please comment in the YouTube chat box or contact HOC's General Counsel. Instructions can be found in the State of Emergency Open Meetings procedure, which is posted on HOC's website. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting is adjourned for closed session. Thank you.